Another day, another ballad. Welcome back to the Dufu Explained series. And this is another much quoted and anthologized poem by Dufu called the Li Renxing, Fair Ladies, a ballad, or a ballad of fair ladies. And the fact that it's much quoted and anthologized is really the only reason I want to talk about it. Here we have Dufu again in protest singer mode, and this is really not my favorite type of poem by Dufu at all. This time his object of censure is the lavish displays of power from the most corrupt family of the day, the women of the Yang clan. So we have here a ballad again, and yeah, this time it's as usual 7 words per line, a little bit of irregularities here, and this is quite straightforward language-wise, though it contains interesting pieces of vocabulary that will be worthwhile going into. But let me just vent a little bit first, because I just have to point out how stupid it is that these protest songs, like this one and the one with the army wagons, the Bing Xing, that the poems like this, which are really not very numerous in Dufu's catalog, the fact that they are nowadays considered to be Dufu's signature pieces. You have to think about this. This is a poet who gives us the most august vision of all of Confucian spirituality, you might say, and who manages to sort of in his best poems to condense the entire worldview of at least 1500 years or so, and its visions of the highest good and the highest beauty in his poetry. And then we have poems like this, where yeah, he's upset about the emperor not living up to the standards of a sage ruler. Rightly so, But this simply does not rise to the level of his best poems. And even in China, never mind the decadent West, people can't stop going on about Dufu's sense of social justice, I mean, I'll be damned if he didn't have a sense of social justice. Having a sense of social justice is equivalent to breathing for a man of Dufu's capacity. So I'll just tell you this right away, that this is not one of my favorite poems by Dufu, and I'm almost, it makes me a little bit angry to talk about it, just because the way I think Dufu is so often misconstrued by his critics. But I'll try to not go into that too much. Let's talk about the poem instead. So this poem is it has quite an interesting historical background also, and that was actually the other reason I wanted to talk about it. So this is around 753, 54. So we're a mere year or so away from the breakout of the Andalusian rebellion. And at this point, as you may be aware, the sage emperor Xuanzong, he had an infatuation with a woman called Yang Guifei. Her name was not exactly Yang Guifei. She was called Yang Yuhuan. Guifei was her title. Guifei was the highest level of the concubine system. So she was a noble concubine, the highest level of concubine, and she was Xuanzong's favorite. And everything about this story is absurd, especially the way it's looked upon nowadays. Nowadays, people have this image of Li Longji and Yang Yuhuan, like they were as if it was a very romantic story. I don't think it's a romantic story at all. I think it's an absurd and crazy story. So this was the emperor of the most powerful empire in Chinese history, and it was really at the top of its power. And his mental decline at this point was such that he not only did he have a harem full of 40,000 women, is said. I hope that's not wrong, but that's something I read. He had to go and steal this woman, Yang Guifei, from his own son. It's true. It's absurd. She was actually the wife of one of the emperor's own sons, one of the princes, and he got infatuated with her, and he broke off the marriage. I mean, they were married for years, and after like 10 years or so, he realized, he has a really nice wife. So he told them to get divorced, and he put the woman in a Taoist convent for a year or so, and then afterwards he made her one of his most favorite concubines. Then, so she was stolen from his own son, and because of this connection, then. She also had a very incompetent cousin called Yang Guozhong, and he was named Chancellor. You know that Chancellor it's the highest official in the Holy Empire in 752. And that's basically sort of the background for this whole poem. So the whole thing is absurd, and of course this has a tragic end, and I won't go into that right now, but we'll have reasons to talk about what happened afterwards in its own place. So let's just talk about this poem here, but that is the background that you really need to know. So the Li Ren, the beautiful women, not just beautiful person, Li Ren here, Li Ren, it refers to beautiful women. So the beautiful women are Yang Yuhuan or Yang Guifei and her sisters and other women companions, I suppose. And what are they doing here? Let's start reading the poem. 3月3日天气新，长安水边多丽人. So you see how easy the language can be sometimes. There's really nothing language-wise going on here that anyone who knows at least a little bit Chinese wouldn't understand. So this is easy. 3月3日, the third day of the third month. This is the date of the nowadays little-known Shangsi. So that's a festival, a traditional ancient festival, which seems to have always included some kind of outing to a river. So they're supposed to be in the Qujiang Park, the winding river park, which was a sort of park complex outside of Chang'an, which was very popular with the residents of the city. And the Chinese third month is roughly May or late April. So according to contemporary sources, this is said to have been really the spring break of the time. Like everyone was outside having a great time doing crazy things, and even the imperial court, they were having these spring outings, and that's what they're doing here. Then he starts describing the beautiful women, the Li Ren. 太浓意远疏且真，肌理细腻骨肉匀. And I said I don't like this poem that much, but of course he writes beautifully, especially this first line I think is really magnificent. 太浓意远疏且真. So both of these lines, obviously, they describe the natural beauty of the women. 浓, voluptuous. Their appearance or their attitude is concentrated. It's almost as if they have a presence that you can feel. But even though you can feel their presence here, it seems that they are somewhere else mentally. 意远, their mood remote. Really good line, I must say. And then just pure and true, which, I mean, we might be justified in sensing a little bit of irony here. 疏且真. That's not the best way to describe Yang Yuhuan and her infamous sisters. Anyway, and it's 肌理细腻, yeah, the skin's texture or the texture of their muscles are delicate and glossy, blah, blah, blah. You can imagine they are super sexy women. That's what Du Fu is saying in so many words almost. 绣罗衣裳照暮春. 暮春, sorry, I'm mangling this. 促金孔雀迎麒麟. And here he talks about what they're wearing, obviously embroidered gossamer gowns. Yes, shine on the end of spring. Literally, that's what he says. And 促金, that's what's called here, gold appliqué. Well, it's some kind of embroidery. So there's unicorns and peacocks on their clothes. 头上何所有？翠微荷叶垂冰唇。背后何所见？朱鸦腰结稳衬身. Well, I almost had to laugh a little bit. I think this 头上何所有 What do they have on their heads? 背后何所见 What do they have on their backs? It's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? But this is ballad format, obviously. 翠微 kingfisher feather fine leaf tiaras. Well, how do we translate this? 翠微荷叶. So 荷叶, this fine leaf tiaras, it seems to be certainly or probably at least some ornament that resembles a leaf. 荷叶. And 翠微, kingfisher feather. I mean, 翠, I think, of course, the original meaning of this is it has a feather character top here, feather radical, but this is also just as frequently used as for a type of jade. So it might, I think this is probably just some kind of jade leaf thing that these women have in their hair, because the 垂冰唇 interests to lips. I wonder if this 冰唇 is not more like the lip of the tress. So they have these things dangling by their ears. And on the backs we can see 猪呀腰级. This is an unusual character, but it just means a belt or a waistband. And it's encumbered, yeah, 猪呀 encumbered or with pearls pressing down on it, and it fits perfectly to their body. Wonderful. 旧中云木交坊清，次名大国国与秦. This is really one long sentence, actually. Let's talk about the words. 旧中, this is colloquial language. It means the same thing as 其中, which is probably obvious, but I'll just point it out. It belongs to the ballad form that you use these more sort of colloquial things. This is protest style stuff. And then we have 云木交坊亲. So the 交坊亲, the kin of pepper chambers in the cloud-like tents. The 云木, cloud-like tents that are like clouds, is a conventional metaphor. But this 交坊, I should explain, the peppered chambers. So this is said to have been the name of a Han Dynasty palace hall, where the empress lived, and it was named for the perfumed walls. So the walls were impregnated with some kind of peppery perfume. And this word occurs in the literature with some regularity, and then it refers to sort of imperial concubines in general. So the relatives of the imperial concubines are 交坊亲. And there's the context here is that one of the expressions of the emperor's favor for Yang Guifei was that he actually also made the sisters of this Yang Guifei into noble women with feudal titles, also absurd, you know. So they were a whole mafia of Yangs taking over the inner court, and one was the lady of Guo and one was the lady of Qin. They have been granted the names of the great nations of Guo and Qin. Yes, absurd. Strange and absurd. And this lady Guo is of particular interest here, and I'll return to that in a moment. 紫托之风出翠府，水晶之盘行素林. Here we get into the fascinating subject of what these noble and beautiful people eat. So they have a purple hump of a camel. Yes, 紫托之风. So the feng is the hump of the camel. Why is it purple? I don't know. It sounds disgusting. From what I know, the hump of a camel is basically just this large blob of fat, which may be delicious or not, but I don't see why it should be purple. But let's say that it's purple, perhaps from the spices, and it emerges from an azure cauldron. Yes, so a jade-decorated cauldron. Yeah, why not? 水晶之盘, plates of crystal. So 水晶 Yeah, this would normally, or at least in modern Chinese, it would be another character that's pronounced the same. The Jing with the 3 suns, 3个日子, Jing. So they have plates made of crystal, extremely expensive dining. Su Ling, fish, basically. Yes, fish. Pale white scales are the fish. So it goes, Xing. This fish is passed around, I guess, among the ladies. But they've had so much to eat, they can't even get it down. 西柱燕玉酒未下，鸾刀吕切空分轮. So they have rhino horn chopsticks. Look at this. 西柱 rhino horn chopsticks. You know, some things were just better back then. You know, the richest person in the world can't have this today. They have rhino horn chopsticks. Isn't it wonderful? And they are 艳遇, they're full, fed up. And thus, the rhino horn chopsticks, they haven't been lowered. That is, they haven't been lowered in order to pick up food for a long time. They're just sitting there and looking at all this magnificent food. Horrible people. Oh, we can feel you, Du Fu. We really can feel you. 鸾刀, phoenix knives. This is actually something that occurs in the Shi Jing. So it's an old piece of vocabulary. It's said to have been a knife with little bells on, which sing harmoniously. So they sound like phoenixes, and therefore they are called a 鸾刀. And the 鸾刀, they have cut the fish, or they have cut the food so finely that it's like threads, 捋切. And their the activity of these knives are described as 分轮, which have all been in vain. 空分轮. Yes. And we go on. 黄门飞控不动尘，玉杵落意送八针. The yellow gates flying bridles. Yeah, Owen doesn't translate this. 黄门. 黄门 means eunuchs. I don't know actually what this originally refers to, where it comes from. I tried to find it before I made this video, but I haven't been able to locate what this word comes from. But Huangmen are eunuchs. So and they have flying bridles. So Kong are bridles, and flying then presumably because the horses run so fast. So this all refers to all the servants that they have, and the male servants attending the imperial concubines were, of course, castrated, all of them. And because they fly so fast, they don't even stir the dust. You know, their horses are flying rather than running. And the royal kitchen or the imperial cooks run back and forth with 8 precious foods. Yes, 八珍, this is an old formula which we get from the classics. It doesn't refer to any particular set of dishes. It's just used here as a word for various precious foods. And 落意, perhaps a bit unusual, but it just means coming and going without stopping, and it has survived into modern Chinese. This is a modern Chengyu that's called 络绎不绝, which means exactly this. So they have all, you can imagine that they're all gathered in this park, and they're eating, or at least looking at the food, and still there are like these armies of cooks and waiters coming and going with the food, you know. Yeah, you understand. You get the picture. And they have music, of course, as well. 箫鼓哀吟赶鬼神，冰从杂沓食妖精. So music, what kind of music do they have? They have 箫, flute, and gu, drums. I don't know why Owen says panpipes here. A 箫 is not a panpipe. A 箫is more like it's a vertical flute, it looks like a long recorder, but I'm not sure if it technically resembles a recorder. I'm not too musically schooled, but okay. So 箫 is not a panpipe, at least. 箫鼓哀吟, the moving, sorrowful sounds that they make, you know, and they're so moving that they stir spirits and gods. 赶鬼神, the spiritual beings are affected. This sounds a bit strange, perhaps, But I think the association should probably be to an imperial sacrifice or the like, because it's reasonable to think that some kind of ritual was perhaps performed on this 上巳节, because it's a festival in the ancient Chinese almanac and everything. And 宾从, attendant guests, yes, guests and followers, 宾从, and they're 杂沓, throng around, yes, this is an adjective, which signifies there's lots of people. This is truly the gate to power, 石妖精, or 妖精, 石妖精, 妖精 are people that have large political power. I think we talked about this word in another video. So the metaphor is an important ford, ford as in where you cross a river. So an important ford where an army, for example, can cross, that's an important strategic point, and thus, by extension, this is also used for any sort of important position in the court or in society. So, and the people in themselves are referred to as 妖精 when they have lots of power. And 石妖精, truly. Yeah, this word is used like this sometimes. Sorry. This word 石 is used like this sometimes. Like truly the gates of power. Well, gate to power, the ford of power. Yeah, 妖精. Truly powerful people. So everything that we've just read so far is just, their food, their servants, and the surfeit, and the waste and everything. All of this is just part of the mythology around Guifei, which is of course based in fact. This was, as I said, the richest empire in China ever, and strangely romanticized now. But the description we get from Du Fu, it sounds absurd in some ways, but this description is really quite modest compared to some things that you read. So this is the whole story of Yang Yuhuan. And the funny thing is here that we get the feeling that they would actually move around in public so that you could see them. And we get more, this is fleshed out a little bit in the last 6 lines, which I just put together like this because they belong together, I think. Here, Yang Guozhong himself shows up. So Yang Guozhong, I remind you again, was the cousin of Yang Guifei, the concubine, and he was at this point the chancellor of China, so the most important political figure. 后来鞍马和春巡，当轩下马入锦衣。杨花雪露覆白屏，青鸟飞去衔红巾。炙手可热势绝伦，慎莫近前丞相称。So let's talk about this one line at a time. 后来鞍马, so another saddled horse comes afterwards. This is Yang Guozhong himself, and he walks slowly, without being in a hurry. 逡巡, slowly. This is an old word. And 当轩下马, he gets off the horse. This is also ballad form, I must remind you. 马 in the same couplet. It wouldn't look very good in a 律诗 or anything like that, but it belongs fairly well in the ballad format. 当轩, in front of the great carriage. This 轩, of course, has a number of meanings, but carriage, a great carriage, is its original meaning, so that's the significance it's used in here. And he gets off his horse and he 入锦衣, goes in on the brocade mat. 衣, mat, yeah, which has been spread on the ground then. This yin, actually, I should remark on. This is a semi-unusual character, I suppose, but you should really know this character. And you know why? Because this character is the original significance of this bit. The character 因为的因, because. That was originally a picture of a person lying on a mattress or something, or sitting on a mattress, and thus its original meaning was mattress, yin, which has the same pronunciation as because yin, and thus the meaning was the character was lent or borrowed to signify the meaning because, and then another character later was constructed with this grass radical in order to talk about the original meaning, which is interesting. So this is the original significance of the yin, but that's a parenthesis, of course, in the context of this poem, but I just thought I should mention it. Then we have this stuff. This couplet, yeah, I will talk about this a little bit later, but let's just look at the actual words. I think this is nothing strange. You can just compare with the translation here. 青鸟飞去衔红巾. I think this 青鸟 is perhaps a bird like a parrot or something, so that it's trained to carry things in its beak, like perhaps little kerchiefs or stuff that the beautiful ladies like to use. And there's said to be an allusion in this couplet. I'll talk about that in a moment. 炙手可热势绝伦. Here it's summarized, the power that these people have. Their power is 炙手可热. Oh, yeah. So this is a bit strange, perhaps. I think a more normal word order would be 热可炙手, a heat so that it burns the hands. Yeah, but it says 炙手可热 and not 热可炙手. Anyway, so all of this is an attribute of 势 here. 炙手可热 的势, power or position, social position, is beyond all bounds. Yeah. And this 炙手可热, it seems to have been proverbial, so it's not an invention of Dufu or 热可炙手, something like that. And 慎莫近前丞相 so 丞相, the minister, is of course Yang Guozhong. Don't come close, you know. The minister's here, so now don't come too close. 莫近前, be careful not to come too close, because then he will stare angrily at you, and who knows, maybe he will say, off with its head, or anything like that. And why? So the why, here's where the, why doesn't he want you to come too close? Why does he get too angry and glares at you if you come too close? Well, the explanation is supposed to be contained in this strange little couplet, which doesn't seem to add much information, does it? So what does this refer to? Like 杨花雪落覆白品, willow flowers fall like snow covering white water clover. Is Dufu here just describing the scenery? Well, it sounds like that, isn't it? But commentators have detected something else in this, and I'm not sure about this, but I'll just tell you. I don't really want to go too deep into this, but there seems to be a historical fact that this Yang Guozhong, being the sort of disgusting and incompetent person that he was, he had an incestual relation with his cousin. That is not with Yang Yuhuan, but with another one of the sisters. So the Lady Guo, who was mentioned in another line in the poem. Let's see, where do we have the Lady Guo? Here, Guo, right? And so they had this incestual relationship, and it's mentioned in several sources, and it seems to have been common knowledge. You know, these people were so powerful that they didn't really have to hide what they were doing. So it is perhaps likely that this couplet refers to something like it, but who knows? And I don't really understand why. Like 杨花雪落覆白品. Okay, so he is the minister is the willow flowers, I suppose, and he falls like snow on the white water clover, who is then the Lady Guo, and little birds fly back and forth with messages and red kerchiefs or something. Does this signify something sexual? I don't know, but this is what commentators want to read into this line, and perhaps with some reason, because as I said, it doesn't fit very comfortably there otherwise. And since Dufu has been talking a lot about, like, it's like a huge crescendo. Like, he starts first, he just talks about the way, how beautiful they are, their expensive clothes, their expensive food, and that they don't even eat, and they have these armies of servants, and they have this beautiful music and everything. And then also, you know, they have illicit sex in the great carriage, or something like that. You know, don't come too close. Well, that's the implication. Well, that's fun, isn't it? I mean, it's not a bad poem, but I just get so I just, now that I go through it, I actually feel it's kind of good and fun. But you know, in general, I just have to tell you this. This is a category of poems that are totally overrated today, and I think they are misunderstood. Actually, in general, Du Fu, his protest poetry is very different from modern poetry. This is not Woody Guthrie, you know, this machine kills fascists. Its basis is not in equality. You know, when he looks at all this and he says, look at these horrible people, what are they doing? The idea is not, why do they have so much and some people have nothing? That's not the point at all. The point is not at all sort of in a sort of Marxist sense, or a modern sort of vive la République, fraternité, égalité, nothing like that. That's not the point. The point is, there is a Confucian ideal of virtue in a ruler. The ruler is supposed to rule. He's supposed to be the best and most virtuous guy around. And when he is not, and he allows things like this to occur, and his women are useless and just wasteful and incestuous, and when the chancellor, the most political figure in the empire, apart from the emperor himself, is this incompetent guy who just sleeps with his cousin. This is a corruption of morals that is repugnant to Du Fu. But this is difficult for moderns to get into. This is really difficult for a modern person to sort of get into this feeling. And thus I think these poems are frequently misunderstood, because we have this sort of revolutionary idea about justice, that justice is all about sort of equalizing between rich and poor. And that is why Du Fu is so upset. But that is actually not why Du Fu is so upset. So we shouldn't misunderstand Du Fu at this point, and we shouldn't try to get our historical sources too close to ourselves, because they are different from us. They occur in a vastly different historical background, and there was no idea whatsoever in Du Fu's mind, I think, that the emperor should be equal with the people or anything like that. Of course, being wasteful and ungrateful and incestuous is not good anyway. So just from a sort of normal human perspective, it's also easily understandable. These poems are really easily understandable, and especially, of course, the other one, Bing Chexing, with the army wagons, all these people that are sent off to die in these pointless wars. But on the other hand, Du Fu's point is not in that one is not either that wars in themselves are necessarily pointless. Those wars were pointless. That was the point. So we shouldn't try to impose too much of our own ideas on Du Fu. And I think, in general, probably the fact that there's a communist regime in China at the moment has had, you know, quite serious effects on sort of the way that Du Fu is approached and understood today. And I think it's natural in a way, but it's also good to be aware of the various misunderstandings that can occur. So I'll not talk any more about that, and I'll try not to. Perhaps in the next few videos I'll talk about something else that is not ballads and protest songs, but we'll see about that. Thank you for listening, and bye.